Can you start off by just introducing yourself to everyone?
Yes, my name is Faith Holt. I'm a solo emo, I guess, artist out of Nashville, Tennessee. I just put out a new record called The Difference under Chillwave Records back in November, and that pretty much sums it, I guess.
Okay, awesome. So you've been putting out singles for years. What was kind of the deciding factor that now's the time for the album?
So the story on that is that every single that was released over that period of time was actually part of a full record even then. But what would happen was I would get, maybe not distracted is the word, but things would happen, make studio time take longer or this and that. And I would get restless, and then I'd just like drop a song, and then it just kept happening. And then eventually I wrote so much so fast, and they all were so cohesive that I was like, okay, I have to do this correct this time. And so that's what I did, because most of them were written all within the same 7-month period, probably, except the last track is like 5 years old. But other than that, everything just kind of happened all at once.
Nice. So the stars kind of aligned on that one. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to ask you about your writing because all of the songs, lyrically, the themes are pretty heavy. So I was wondering, when you start writing, do you kind of start with the music? Do you start with the lyrics? Does it differ song to song?
I would say usually one of two things happens, and sometimes they combine. I will be driving or something like that, or just at work, something. One weird lyric will pop in my head for absolutely no reason. So I'll put it in my phone. There's like 1,000 notes in here that are like this, and it'll just be one lyric. And then sometimes as the day goes, I'm like, oh, this too, that seems related, and then eventually I'll sit down with it and pick around and then see if I can put it to it, and then if anything else comes out. But the way I've always kind of worked is very much a spit it out all at the same time process. And I've always had this, it's not the same for everyone, because I know there's a lot of people, they'll sit and refine a song over and over and over. I usually, the way I look at it for myself is, if it's taking me too much to write it, usually I just need to cancel it and just come back. Maybe save that lyric that I started with, but um yeah, that's kind of how that works. But then as far as like recording goes, I've always done, the way this whole record was done was I did track guitar and vocals to a click. And then we did the drum session next. The drummer didn't even know what he was going to do that day. Did that, then I built leads on top of it. And so a lot of that, as far as writing goes, was just one element at a time. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Uh, I can very much see that because all of the lyrics come out very raw and very vulnerable. Um, Even how the album opens up with "It's Alright, It's Fine" with the lyric, I think it's getting bad again, and those kind of themes of mental health throughout. Um, I think some of the major themes of the album are the mental health and the self isolation themes. Why are those so important for you to write about in your tracks?
I think ultimately, I mean, for one, I always usually write when I'm at the deepest part of it, for the most part, which unfortunately means when I'm happy, I don't really write much, which is kind of lately. So I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm like, I guess when another storm hits, I'll deal. Um, but I think a lot of it, as a listener, it's very much okay, well, this is not just me. Other people do this. And then I think it's also, I just look at it as putting that on the table and talking about it. Because I have friends and we're pretty open and stuff about talking about all of that too. And it just feels more like what's the way to word it? An open conversation for listeners and stuff. And to know that like you're willing to go there.
Yeah, I think it does a really good job of making the listener feel like they're not alone in those struggles. And it, uh, some of the songs hit me like a ton of bricks because of things I've said to my friends or they've said to me that I think a lot of people can really relate to, which is part of the reason why the album's so good. I also want to talk about what was the decision to make the tracks full band rather than just you and a guitar, kind of more a singer-songwriter vibe.
Um, Growing up, I very much was more, a Paramore kid and that kind of thing. I think if anything, what happened was I was kind of that first. I have a history as a solo Christian artist that I like to keep buried most of the time. But like I put out I did my own like full band Christian record in like 2012. That is not on the internet anymore on purpose. But I come from a background playing with a band and stuff all the time. And then when I kind of eventually got to a point where I was like, I don't want to do this. Also, in the world of LGBTQ and stuff, there's not really a place for me in this market, which that's a whole hole I could go down. But I pulled out of that and I kind of fell into the DIY scene. There was a venue in Nashville called Dad's Garage. Well, it was in Murfreesboro, but I played there. It was like my first show or whatever. And it's kind of like I just had to be by myself at that point. And I had listened to enough Julian Baker and stuff at that point that like I instinctively was kind of doing that some. But eventually I was wanting to go back into full band. And a couple years ago, I got to play. There's a band in Nashville called Pellongs, and they had a EP release once. And they asked me to play, and they were like, "But we want it to be full band." And so I did it for that show, and then I didn't want to go back, unless there's been a couple solo shows where I had to be by myself. But like after that, I didn't want to do that as much.
Nice. And then if you're willing to circle back and kind of fall down that rabbit hole a little bit, I'd love to talk about, you're fairly outspoken about the church's rejection of it. Calling it the church is a little oversimplified, but Christianity's rejection of LGBTQ people and those issues. And I think that's something that's prevalent all across the country. If you'd be willing to talk about your experience with that.
Oh yeah, that's like a thing I can talk about for 10 years. So I'm down. Personally, I realize that sometimes in my music, it wouldn't sound like I didn't have, some people find it surprising to find out that my experience within my own church upbringing and stuff wasn't that bad. And like, I actually came out while I was still, well, started coming out to some people while I was still playing in a worship band every week and all this stuff. Band members were pretty welcoming and stuff, but there was this, just that knowing looming, just knowing that ultimately they're like, okay, we need to change this thing that Faith is doing. And just, that gets into that whole like, what's the word churches use? Man, I can't remember. Except, wait, the Episcopals use it. There's like acceptance, and then there's
Tolerance, maybe.
Yeah, that'll work. I think there was another word, but that's close enough.
Okay.
But like a lot of times they don't realize that the tolerance is not equal to the acceptance and that there's still a difference there. And I grew up going to the same church pretty much for like 15 years. And I had a day where it was around Christmas, actually. It was probably right at 4 years ago. And one of the main Tennessee politicians who is in the Tennessee Senate here, I grew up going to church with him, and he was actually in a lot of national headlines and stuff at the time because he and this other politician here were trying to exempt Tennessee from the marriage ruling in 2015 and say that, Tennessee itself voted on it once, so you can't undo that. And so the whole church was like praying over him and all this stuff. And I watched him get up there and be like, God put me here to do all of this. And I was like, this is my day that I'm out of here. and I never went back after that. And although I did go to an Episcopal church for a little while, and I kind of did see the accepting part of it, because like the keys guy, he was gay. Another leader in the church was married to someone who was trans. Well, after I left, but that was a big deal. They had their wedding at the church, which I was like, that's cool. But ultimately now I'm going in 1,000 directions. It's kind of like I believe in things, but I'm just not really, I hate the word Christian at this point. And sometimes it's so cringy to know that I put out a Christian record years ago. I hate it so much. And sometimes I'll run into people. I was at a funeral a year ago, and some old church members came up. I'm like, oh, we'd love to have you come back and play some of those songs. And I was just like dying inside. I was like, I could never do that again. But yeah. So my own personal experience hasn't been bad. I've had a lot of friends though that have.
Yeah. Well, either way, that's a huge thing because you grow up, for 15 years in that community with those people. So having to leave under any circumstances, I have to imagine difficult.
Yeah.
And on the politician note, I think that's something a lot of listeners here in Indiana will be able to connect with, because you may have heard of Mike Pence.
Oh, yes. You're from Indiana. I forgot about, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I don't, that reminds me of like, there's that movie now from The Prom.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
I'm like, of course, Indiana on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. So we love legislating our homosexuality here.
Yeah.
It's never gay. It's always.
Yep.
So good stuff. Kind of a more fun question on the topic of movies while we're there. Have you seen Happiest Season yet? What's your take on Harper, Riley, Abby?
Oh boy. Okay, so we have watched it. My girlfriend and I watched it after. First of all, it came out and she was gone, and it was killing me because I was like, I have to not watch this movie that has been gifted for like 4 days. But anyways, we watched it all together, and there was very much yelling at the TV about the whole Harper, and my mind went blank. What's the character?
Is that Riley? I think it's Riley.
Yes. Wait, is it? Apparently I'm not gay enough that I can't remember. Anyways, we were definitely yelling at the TV because there were people who were very team Aubrey Plaza in this house eventually. And I think I read some things like from directors and stuff afterwards that were like pointing out, they're like, you're meeting the character going home to her parents like on her worst days. So like, and I was like, okay, well, maybe they're right. I feel like what I really want though is a sequel that goes the Aubrey Plaza direction.
Yeah, I 100% agree there. Also, I think it's hard when you make it Aubrey Plaza because it's hard not to side with her in any situation.
Yeah.
All right, so I kind of want to pivot back. I know you talked about growing up on Paramore. When you're growing up, were your parents playing in the house? What were you listening to as a kid?
I've been waiting for this question for someone to ask me this my whole life so I could give this answer. When I was a kid, because a lot of people have cool answers like, oh, my parents listen to Beatles and this and that, Bruce Springsteen. This is mine. I only remember 2 things getting played when I was a kid. I remember my dad loved the What Women Want movie soundtrack specifically, which, do you know what movie that is?
I am not familiar.
It's from like 2001. It's like Mel Gibson's in it and he can hear women's thoughts. I've watched it as an adult. Post Me Too movement and stuff, it would not hold very well. People would be angry. It would not make it to theaters. But so it was that soundtrack. And then my parents were all about Celine Dion.
Okay.
So
nice.
I was also a Celine Dion fan as a kid, and LeAnn Rimes, but
there is a lot worse music to grow up on.
Oh no, I know. It just, the What Women Want soundtrack kills me, and it's just like, I can't remember. It's like I can't remember what any of the specific songs were, but it's just the fact that entire soundtrack my whole childhood played.
Yeah. So then when you were kind of getting out, growing up a little bit, I don't know if you were in like the MySpace, Tumblr generation.
Yeah, I didn't really do Tumblr, but I did MySpace.
Okay, so when you kind of hit that age, what were you discovering and what were you listening to?
Let's see. So that would have been around, I think my MySpace was made when I was in 8th grade. I'm pretty sure. Something like that. 7th, 8th grade. So I'd hit the Paramore thing by then because that was right after their first record. Um, I was all about Switchfoot pretty much my whole life, which to a point I sort of still am. Not really into the last couple records, but it's kind of like for nostalgia's sake, I will see them every time I can. Um, but that was also the era of like, I didn't really listen to All Time Low, but that was like the era of everyone listening to like All Time Low and Mayday Parade and who's another one? I remember Hawthorne Heights was big back then.
Yeah.
Um, I did listen to a bit of Reliant K. I remember there was this band called Automatic Love Letter years ago. I listened to them a bit. Trying to think if there's anyone.
What was that song that played when you hit your page? Do you remember that?
I know I would have changed it multiple times. There's a good chance that it was something Switchfoot related or Paramore.
Okay.
That would probably be. But MySpace, I was in MySpace for a while because I'm that old, apparently old enough for it. So like it lasted through until Facebook got going.
Okay. Fair enough. So how has what you listen to kind of changed now, and what do you listen to kind of get inspired to write and make your own music?
I would say, are we talking like current specific or maybe the last like couple years?
Last couple years.
Okay, because I'm going through a hardcore pop phase right now,
Okay.
which is like very different from
I'll roll with that too if you want to throw some of those out there.
I will say I'll backtrack, but I
Okay.
will say the big ones right now is I listen to tons of Sasha Sloan still. She put a record out a couple months ago, but Sasha Sloan and Chelsea Cutler is a thing that's always going around here. And then, but I also do love the new Sea Haven record, so there is that. But the last couple years, I fell into, I'll say, definitely the Julian Baker, Phoebe Bridgers. I feel like I always end up looking at my phone when I'm trying to figure out who I've been listening to for some reason.
It's all right. That for some reason is always the hardest question on earth.
Yeah, and it's like you listen to it all the time, but somehow you're like, oh yeah, top 2020 to help me out.
There we go.
It's all pop. Oh, I do love Hot Mulligan. I would say there's an artist named Gracie Abrams. She's kind of in the middle of all of those categories. And then recently, JP Sachs has been something. All of my top 2020 is pop music, so that's like hard. Oh, I love Future Teens though. Future Teens has been a big thing for the last 2 years. I'd put that towards the top. Who else? I feel like there's so many things, and then when you get asked, it's like so hard to just like narrow down.
Yeah. No, as a music fan, I absolutely get that.
Yeah, I'm like, I know there's like big things that I'm not thinking of. Oh, a big one for me. Okay, two big ones. I can't believe I didn't think of this. When I started kind of changing over into the style of writing and stuff that I do now, the big shift from my Christian background to now involved lots of Noah Gunderson and lots of Brandy Carlisle.
Okay.
Brandy Carlisle is always a staple, so I don't even know how I didn't even think about that. But yeah.
When you were making that transition from a more Christian artist into the DIY scene, what was finding that scene like? Were you still in Tennessee?
Yes. When it was interesting because in a way I played so much in church because I played like every Sunday for like 6 years, 7 years, I don't know. And but I had not ever played a show that was like a normal show. And so I remember being so horrified. The first show I played, it was at Dad's Garage, like I mentioned, in Murfreesboro in like 2000. I think it was 2016. I'm pretty sure. It was like spring 2016. And I remember being so nervous that I could not like control this hand. And I opened with August 1st, which was the biggest like mistake that could have happened because of that picking that comes in. And I remember everyone was so quiet that it was horrifying. But then after that show, everyone kept coming up to me like freaking out. And I was like, this is strange. And they were like all about like lyrics in the songs and like people talking about how you hear a pin drop and all this stuff. And I was like, not real sure what to do with this. This is different. And then I kind of played that show. I didn't really know anyone there. Like I messaged who would have answered me, I'm pretty sure would have been AJ, who is Bogues, if anyone knows who that is. But I think he's who booked me on that show and just let me stumble in there not knowing anything. And after that, I just had a snowball where people kept asking me to play. And before I knew it, I just had friends everywhere. And I think I have loved the scene that I found, which now sometimes it's hard to remember because COVID has kept everything down for so long. I'm like, I never knew that I would miss playing a 5-band bill that started at 9:00.
Yeah. How have you been channeling your creative energy in COVID and quarantine?
I after I finished tracking the record back in like February or March. And then I haven't really played much since then, piddled around, written a little bit. But like since then, one thing that happened was I bought a Cricut.
Okay.
So I went down that route. So I messed with that a bit. It's been making me some side money, so that's good.
There we
But
go.
yeah, and I've done some other writing blog post kind of things that I haven't put up anywhere yet. I don't know what my plan is, but that kind of talks about like some of the church stuff that we talked about and all of that. And so I'm writing something with that. I'm not real sure what it is yet. But I am starting to feel like I'm starting to get back into music again. So I think post holidays I'm going to take a couple days off late January or something and shut myself in the house by myself and see if when no one's home if I can muster stuff back up, because usually once I get the ball rolling I can't stop it. I just have to get it pushed. So
Yeah, I think that's with any kind of writing, kind of the common theme is getting those first few words on the page.
yeah.
All right. Awesome. So where can people find you at?
You can find me at, I do have faithholtmusic.com, which has links to all the socials, but Twitter's Faith A. Holt, Instagram's Faith Holt. Music is available on all the platforms at this point, Spotify, Apple Music. People in this house like Napster, so it's there too. I forget it exists.
I'll be looking for it on LimeWire next.
Yeah, now that one I don't know about. Man, what a throwback. Yeah, during those Mayday Parade days, I was on there.
Yeah, so. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, and the one thing I have everyone that comes on the show do is recommend a song. It can be your music, it can be someone else's music, it can be absolutely anything on the internet.
Okay. I'm thinking.
This is the other hardest question on earth.
Yeah, that one is. I'm deciding between. So one of my friends is named Taylor Jansen, and she put out an EP once. She put out a different one since then. Hold on, I'm having to cheat.
No, you're good.
She has an EP out called wait, Interpersonal. I very much would suggest that to anyone to listen to. Colorblind's one of my favorite songs of all time. So
Okay, awesome. And then with your music, where should people start? What's a track that they should start with?
I would say Contentment off the new record, or Hell in My Head, which was a single previous to that, which kind of feels, it almost could have fit on the record, so it's not too different. But thematically, those are my picks.
Okay, great. So we'll have Colorblind up next and Hell in My Head after that. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Faith.
No problem. Thank you.